says, quote, "My plan is to be here for the rest of my career. If they don't want me, I'm not the one in charge." Would the Bucks ever trade Giannis without him publicly requesting one?
Never. What happens if Giannis hits free agency? There is a scenario in which he could just leave in free agency.
Before we get into this, if you enjoy calm, honest NBA breakdowns that go deeper than headlines and rumors, make sure you're part of the Ball IQ Zone family. Stick around, because this story is way bigger than it looks. Just days ago, Giannis Antetokounmpo said something that sounded like the end of the story. "I will never come out and say I want to trade. That's not in my nature." And on the surface, that feels like case closed. Giannis is staying in Milwaukee. End of discussion. Pack it up, move on. But here's the thing, that was only half the message. Because in that same interview, Giannis quietly said something else. Something far more revealing. Something most people completely skipped over. And once you hear it, the entire situation changes. Giannis reminded everyone that he isn't the one in charge. He said he's an employee, someone else writes the checks. And one day, that same person might decide they don't want to write that check anymore. That's not Giannis pledging loyalty. That's Giannis shifting responsibility. What he's really saying is this: I'm not going to be the villain. I'm not going to blow this up publicly. But the power? That's in Milwaukee's hands. This is a calculated move, a chess move. Giannis understands exactly how trade demands affect legacy. He knows how certain stars are remembered when they force their way out, and that's why he refuses to say the words himself. Not because the situation is perfect, but because he doesn't want history to remember him the wrong way. And we've seen this movie before. Superstars don't always leave by asking out. Sometimes teams make the decision for them. When a front office chooses flexibility, picks, or a long-term reset over pushing all their chips in, the exit becomes inevitable, even if the player never says it out loud. That's the uncomfortable reality Bucks fans need to understand. Giannis doesn't have to demand anything. The timeline is already ticking, and if Milwaukee ever decides that the future matters more than the present, the decision might be made for him. Because the scariest part isn't a trade request. It's the clock. And once that clock gets close to zero, leverage disappears. And that's where this story truly begins. Here's the quiet truth nobody in Milwaukee wants to say out loud. Giannis doesn't need to ask for a trade for this situation to explode. And the Bucks don't need to want to trade for it to become unavoidable. There's a third outcome that keeps front offices up at night: free agency. If Milwaukee sits down with Giannis and puts an extension on the table and he says, "No, I want to see free agency," the entire power dynamic flips instantly. Because at that moment, the Bucks aren't protecting a superstar anymore. They're protecting their franchise. That's the nightmare scenario, and everyone inside the organization knows it. Now, let's be brutally honest about where Milwaukee actually is. This isn't a temporary slump. This is erosion. The Bucks are sitting outside the playoff picture, and this decline didn't start this season. It started the moment the championship glow faded. Since lifting the trophy, they've been eliminated early year after year. Not competitive losses, collapses. Each postseason exit more alarming than the last. The trend line is clear, and it's pointing in the wrong direction. The Damian Lillard gamble was supposed to reverse that trend. Instead, it emptied the war chest. Milwaukee sacrificed picks, flexibility, and a core championship piece in exchange for hope. And that hope never materialized. What they're left with now is financial weight without on-court return and a roster that can't realistically be upgraded. And yet, Giannis hasn't declined. If anything, he's playing some of the best basketball of his career. Elite efficiency, dominant production, historic impact on both ends of the floor. The numbers scream MVP-level dominance. But the on-off reality tells the real story. When Giannis plays, Milwaukee looks competitive. When he doesn't, the floor collapses. That gap exposes the truth. This is not a contender being held back by bad luck. This is a roster being carried by one man, and that's why the Bucks are trapped. They don't have the assets to retool. They don't have the picks to swing another big move. They don't have the cap space to shop solutions. The cupboard is empty. Which means if Giannis signals even the slightest hesitation about extending long-term, Milwaukee has to act. Because letting a generational player walk for nothing would be organizational malpractice. So if a trade ever happens, it won't be emotional, it won't be dramatic, it'll be strategic. And here's where things get interesting. For years, the obvious destinations were teams loaded with picks and young talent. But those teams have quietly stepped aside. They've chosen patience. They've chosen continuity. They've chosen the long game. That narrows the field dramatically. New York has always hovered around this conversation, but their flexibility isn't what it used to be. The Knicks are winning. They believe in their chemistry, and their draft capital is thinner than people realize. Unless the situation becomes laser-focused on one destination, New York doesn't control this process. Miami, on the other hand, has crept into position without making noise. Their assets are real. Their identity is proven. Their front office doesn't hesitate when stars become available. And on the court, the fit is terrifying. 2 elite defenders, endless lineup versatility, a system built for pressure moments. Then there's the wild card, Golden State. This is the nuclear option. The move that rewrites eras. The kind of swing franchises only take when they believe the window is closing. The Warriors know what Giannis represents, not just a superstar, but a reset of gravity. A player who bends playoff series by himself. And that's the reality. Giannis may never ask out. Milwaukee may never want to trade him. But time doesn't care. And time is the most dangerous opponent in this entire saga. There are offers that make sense on paper, even if none of them feel comfortable. Take Golden State. The appeal isn't hard to understand. A young forward still years away from his prime, a veteran champion whose contract can be rerouted for more assets, and future draft picks that suddenly become extremely valuable once the current era ends. Those post-dynasty picks carry real weight. For a front office staring down a potential rebuild, that matters. For the Warriors, the vision is obvious. Pairing Giannis with an all-time shooter and a proven playoff leader would instantly create one of the most dangerous cores in the league. Talent-wise, it's a championship swing. But none of that matters unless Giannis signs off on it. And right now, there's no clear indication that this is a destination he's pushing toward. Then there's the sleeper scenario most people overlook, Atlanta. What makes them unique isn't star power, it's leverage. Atlanta controls future draft picks that originally belonged to Milwaukee. In a potential reset, that's gold. Getting your own picks back means control. It means flexibility. It means a clean slate instead of a long, painful rebuild with no safety net. Any deal would center around elite young talent and future capital. But here's the dilemma. Atlanta is in transition. They've already pivoted once. The question is whether adding a generational superstar accelerates their timeline or completely disrupts it. Do you chase relevance now, or do you let your young core grow and see what the draft brings over the next 2 seasons? That uncertainty is why this situation hasn't moved yet. And that brings us back to Milwaukee. Publicly, the message is consistent. They're not trading their franchise player. They're looking for ways to upgrade the roster. They want to compete now. That sounds good. It also sounds unrealistic. Because how do you save a season without picks, without cap space, and without movable contracts? What move actually changes the ceiling of a team hovering outside the playoff picture? Even if a marginal upgrade happens, does that suddenly turn this roster into a legitimate contender in a loaded conference? That's the disconnect. This isn't about effort, it's about options. And that's why league insiders keep pointing to the same moment on the calendar, summer. That's when everything crystallizes. Milwaukee will put a massive extension on the table. Life-changing money, long-term security, legacy comfort. And Giannis will have to answer a simple question with massive consequences. Do you commit to stability, knowing the path to another title is unclear? Or do you bet on uncertainty, knowing the league will reshape itself around you if you say no? Here's the part that changes everything. Giannis doesn't have to demand a trade. He doesn't have to cause chaos. He doesn't have to say a single controversial word. All he has to do is hesitate. Because the moment that extension isn't signed, the math changes. The leverage disappears. And Milwaukee can't afford to wait. Letting a generational player walk for nothing isn't loyalty, it's failure. So here's the most realistic outcome. Nothing happens at the deadline. Everyone stays calm. Everyone says the right things. The season plays out, and then summer arrives. That's when the real decision is made. Not by public statements, not by rumors, but by one signature, or the lack of one. Giannis may never ask for a trade. He might mean every word he says. But sometimes the situation doesn't ask for permission. Sometimes the trade comes to you. Now I want to hear from you. If you're Giannis, what do you do? And if you're Milwaukee, what's the move? Drop your thoughts below. This story is far from over.